Apolinario Mabini basic background. Mabini was born on July 23, 1864 in Barangay Talaga in Tanwan, Batangas. He was the second of 8 children of Junicia Marangan, a vendor in the Tanwan market, and Inocencio Mabini, a baker. In 1881, Mabini received a scholarship to go to the Colegio de San Juan de Letran in Manila. A professor there decided to pick on him because his shabby clothing clearly showed he was poor. Mabini amazed the professor by answering a series of very difficult questions with ease. Mabini's mother had wanted him to take up the priesthood, but his desire to defend the poor made him decide to take up law instead. A year after receiving his Bacillus in Artis with highest honor and the title Professor of Latin from Letran, he moved on the University of Santo Tomas, where he received his law degree in 1894. John Trino, reporter.
Comparing Mabini's generation of Filipino intellectuals to the previous one of Jose Rizal and the other members of the propagandists, journalists and national artists of the Philippines for literature, Nick Joaquin describes Mabini generation as the next iteration in the evolution of Filipino intellectual development. Europe had been a necessary catalyst for the generation of Rizal. By the time of Mabini, the Filipino intellectual had advanced beyond the need for enlightenment abroad. The very point of Mabini's accomplishment is that all his schooling, all his training was done right here in his own country. The argument of Rizal generation was that Filipinos were not yet ready for self-government because they had too little education and could not aspire for more in their own country. The evidence of Mabini's generation was that it could handle the affairs of government with only the education it had acquired locally. It no longer needed Europe. It had embedded all it needed of Europe. Mabini joined the guild of lawyers after graduation, but they did not choose to practice law in a professional capacity. He did not set up his own law office and instead continued to work in the office and a notary public. Instead, Mabini put his knowledge of law to much use during the days of the Philippine Revolution and the Filipino-American War. Joaquin notes that all his contributions to Philippine history somehow involved the law. Dino Marco Bistel, reporter.
Mabini joined the fraternity of Freemasonry in September 1892, affiliating with Lodge Balagtas and taking on the name Katabay. The following year, Mabini became a member of La Liga Filipina, which was being resuscitated after the arrest of its founder Jose Rizal in 1893. Mabini made secretary of its new Supreme Council. This was Mabini's first time to join an explicit patriotic organization. Mabini, whose advocacies favored the reformist movement, pushed for the organization to continue its goal of supporting La Solidaridad and the reforms it advocated. When more revolutionary members of the Liga indicated that they did not think the reform movement was getting result and wanted to more openly support the revolution, La Liga Filipina split into two functions: the moderate Cuerpo de Compromisarios, which wanted simply to continue support the revolution and the explicit revolutionary Katipunan. Mabini joined the Cuerpo de Compromisarios when Jose Rizal, part of the La Liga Filipina, was executed in December that year. However, he changed his mind and gave the revolution his wholehearted support. John Trino, reporter.
Polio and eventual paralysis. Mabini was struck by polio in 1895, and the disease gradually incapacitated him until January 1896, when he finally lost his use of both his legs. His abilities struck in life of Apolinario Mabini when he was in his 30th prime of his life, but this ability did not stop him to show his courage and means of revolutionary exigency during his time. With his physical limitation, the actual battlefield, Mabini armed himself with aggressive mind, soul, and deep patriotism, which made him martyr to cause of country freedom. Red Adlawan, reporter.
1896 Revolution and Arrest. When the plans of the Katipunan were discovered by Spanish authorities and the first active phase of 1896 Philippine Revolution began in earnest. We all know that causes of Philippine Revolution is the abuses of Spanish officials and priests, discovery of the Katipunan and Bonifacio's call for revolution. Mabini, still ill, was arrested along with numerous other members of La Liga Filipina for his work with the reform movement. 13 patriots arrested in Cavite were tried and eventually executed, earning them the title of 13 Martyrs of Cavite. Jose Rizal himself was accused of being party to the revolution and would eventually be executed in December that year. When the Spanish authorities saw that Mabini was paralyzed, however, they decided to release him after. The Philippine Revolution began in 1801 and really ended up in 1901. At first, it was a war of independence against Spain. Later, it turned into a war of independence against the United States. The first part of revolution was a success. Many of our best heroes were killed during the revolution. On August 13, 1896, Father Agustin Hernandez wrote to Don Manuel Luengo, the civil governor of Manila, about the evening gathering in his parish. August 19, 1896, Katipunan was finally discovered by the betrayal of Teodoro Pateno to Father Mariano Hill. Advisor to the revolutionary government, Apolinario Mabini sent to the hospital after his arrest. Mabini remained in health for a considerable time. He was seeking the curative properties of the hot springs in Los Baños, Laguna in 1898. When Emilio Aguinaldo sent for him, asking him to serve as advisor to the revolution. During this convalescent period, Mabini wrote the pamphlets El Verdadero Decalogo and Ordenanzas de la Revolución. Aguinaldo was impressed by their works and by Mabini's role as a leading figure in La Liga Filipina, and made arrangement for Mabini to be brought from Los Baños to Kawit, Cavite. It took hundreds of men, taking turns carrying his aircraft to portage Mabini to Kawit. He continued to serve as the chief advisor for General Aguinaldo after the Philippine Declaration of Independence on June 12. He drafted decrees and edited the first ever constitution in Asia, the Malolos Constitution, for the first Philippine Republic, including the framework of the revolutionary government, which was implemented in Malolos in 1899. Angelique Villaluz, reporter.
Prime Minister of the Philippines. Apolinario Mabini was appointed Prime Minister of the Philippines and was also foreign Minister of the newly independent dictatorial government of Aguinaldo on January 2, 1899. Mabini found himself in the center of the most critical period in the new country's history, grappling with problems. Until then, an image most notable of these were his negotiable with American, which began on March 6, 1899. Julian Badong, reporter.
Death. Not long after his return, Mabini died of cholera in Manila on May 13, 1903 at the age of 38. Historical remembrance. Mabini's complex contribution to the Philippine history are often distilled into two historical monikers. The two historical monikers are the brain of the revolution and the sublime paralytic. Brains of the revolution. Because of his rule as avidor during the formation of the revolutionary government and his contribution and statements thereafter, Mabini is often referred to as the brain of the revolution. Sublime paralytic. Mabini is also famous for having achieved all of this, despite having lost the use of both his legs to polio just prior to the Philippine Revolution. This has made Mabini one of the Philippines' most visually iconic national heroes. Geraldine Fruda, reporter.
Controversy about Mabini's paralysis. During his lifetime, there were controversial rumors regarding the cause of Mabini's paralysis. Infighting among members of the Malolos Congress led to the spread of rumors that Mabini's paralysis had been caused by venereal disease. This information reached national artist F. Chanel Jose too late. However, by the time the historian Ambit Ocampo told him about the autopsy results, he had already published Poon, the first novel of his Rosales saga. That novel contained plot points based on the premise that Mabini had indeed become a paralytic due to syphilis. In the later editions, Mabini's disease, an important plot point, was changed to an undefined liver ailment. The ailing Mabini takes pride in the fact that his symptoms are definitely not those of syphilis, despite the rumors spread by his detractors in the Philippine Revolutionary Government. This is Richelle Pasito, reporter.